Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the Quran to pull out some timeless and, frankly, surprisingly modern lessons on leadership, strategy, and maybe most importantly, how to bounce back from a massive setback. And we're going to do it all through the lens of one single pivotal battle. You know, it's a question we've all faced, right? Maybe in business, a personal project, a social movement, that gut-wrenching moment when something that felt like a sure thing just completely falls apart. How do you even begin to process that? How does a team get its morale back and actually find the wisdom in that failure?
Well, for our explainer today, we're looking at a specific historical event that posed this exact problem, the Battle of Uhud. This was a critical moment for the early Muslim community, and our source is an incredible analysis of the Quranic verses that were revealed right after this battle, verses that act as a kind of spiritual and strategic debrief.
So let's dive in. The source text we're looking at argues that these Quranic verses, they're not just some historical recap. No, they're meant to function as a form of soul treatment. Think of it like a divine after-action report, designed specifically to heal, teach, and strengthen a community right after a crisis.
See, the big idea here is that in a moment of crisis, people don't just need new rules or a new strategy. They need a way to process the psychological and, the spiritual hit of a major setback. This analysis shows how the Quran lays out a whole methodology for that, for tackling doubt, grief, and confusion, and actually turning a loss into a powerful lesson.
And the author makes it really clear. This is not just some academic exercise. The argument is that in our own chaotic times, there's a real need to look back at these foundational sources to find a clear path for navigating our own challenges.
All right, so let's get to the first set of lessons and see how this all builds out. This is all about what happened before the defeat, and it focuses on the principles of proactive leadership.
So the Quranic story starts by zeroing in on meticulous preparation. The verses describe the Prophet Muhammad not just, giving orders from a tent somewhere, but physically going out and placing his people in their strategic positions. The takeaway here is huge. Real faith, real reliance on a higher power, isn't passive. It's supposed to be paired with rigorous, hands-on planning and leadership.
But of course, even the best plans can go sideways. And the Quran immediately pivots to the internal battle that kicked off when the believers faced their first test, and it didn't come from the enemy, but from right inside their own ranks.
And this just perfectly illustrates the two opposing forces that were at play. On one side, you had this faction of hypocrites who just up and abandoned the army right before the battle, a move totally designed to shatter morale. And it created this internal crisis where even some of the faithful felt that impulse to just give up. But on the other side, the Quran points to two pillars of steadfastness, divine reassurance, and a conscious choice to put complete trust in God, which acted like an anchor for their hearts against the rising panic.
So how was that trust actually reinforced in the moment? Through a really powerful psychological tool. The text explains that the believers were reminded of their previous victory at the Battle of Badr. Now back then, they were massively outnumbered, totally out-equipped, and yet they won. Recalling that past success, where divine help was so clear, it served as this powerful anchor to keep them steady in this new crisis.
And this brings us to what is probably the most profound insight of the entire analysis. The defeat at Uhud wasn't just a tactical mistake. The Quran completely reframes it, presenting the setback as a trial with deep, intentional purpose. This one verse is a complete game-changer. It introduces this idea that victory and defeat, they aren't permanent states. They're part of a larger divine pattern, and the experience of both is necessary. But why? Why would those fighting for a just cause be allowed to suffer such a painful loss?
Well, the text lays out several layers of wisdom here. The trial worked to expose the hypocrites, right? To separate those with true conviction from those whose commitment was shallow. It was also a way to grant some people the high honor of martyrdom. And crucially, it was a way to purify and humble the believers, reminding them that victory doesn't come from their own strength or their numbers, but from a higher source. It was a tough lesson in humility and reliance.
And if you want a really stunning example of the long, unpredictable arc of this wisdom, just get this. One of the masterminds of the Muslim defeat at Uhud was a brilliant military strategist named Khalid ibn al-Walid. Years later, he actually converts to Islam and becomes one of its greatest champions ever, known as the Sword of God. I mean, it's just such a powerful reminder that today's adversary could literally be tomorrow's ally, and the ultimate outcome of a struggle is never, ever decided in a single battle.
So what does all of this mean for us today, right now? How can these lessons from a 1400-year-old event actually apply to our modern lives, to our work, and to our own personal struggles?
Well, the takeaways are incredibly practical. First, reframe your setbacks. They aren't just failures, they are purposeful moments for testing and for growth. Second, look to the past, either your own past wins or broader historical patterns to stay grounded when things get chaotic. Third, remember that faith and action are two sides of the same coin. Real conviction shows up in diligent preparation. And finally, always take the long view. The story is never over after just one chapter.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to mull over. We all face our own versions of a hood, right? Those moments of unexpected loss or failure. The challenge, and really the opportunity, is to look past the immediate pain and just ask, what is this trying to teach me? What hidden wisdom, what purification, or what new direction might this setback actually hold for me?